Hello everyone, it's Mary Polanco. Thank you so much for joining us again here on the Live Well channel. I'm so excited for our discussion today. Before we get into that, make sure that you are hitting that subscribe button, the like button, the bell thing, because I would hate to miss you. We have some amazing guests coming to the Live Well channel to talk to us about some crucial things when it comes to our well-being. So today's guest is amazing. His name is Satch. He is here today and he's going to be talking with us about a really important topic that I think is getting ever more mainstream, and that is imposter syndrome, and really the connection to our wellness and our well-being, our self-awareness, all of the things that really are going to help us get centered, figure out what our purpose is, and help guide us on that journey. So without further ado, let's get into it. All right, so let's get started talking about this. I am so excited to dive into this conversation because I really feel like it's something that's being talked about quite a bit out there, and it's a really important piece of our well-being, and that is the imposter syndrome and fitting in and what that all means. But before we get into that, let's introduce our guest. I'm so excited for Satch to be here. You'll understand why he's Satch in just a second, but Satch is an experienced and proven leader in leadership development. He is the CEO of Core Leadership. Am I saying that right?
That's correct.
Yep, Core Leadership. He is a retired Chief Master Sergeant from the Air Force, so tons of leadership experience and just a wealth of knowledge. But I'll turn it over to Satch so he can do a little bit more of an intro for us. Over to you.
Hi, my name is David Satchel. Not too all exciting, but my mama calls me Satch. So everybody calls me Satch. And so please do that. And if you see me, yell my name. But if you call me David, I probably won't recognize it. Yes. But yeah, I came from, the same kind of path as Mary, and had, a long career in the Air Force, which was super exciting and it's something that I'm proud of. But now I'm retired and live in Tampa and get to play golf as much as I can. But also I started a company called Core Leadership Consulting, which is core, which means, really driving from the inside of you to lead and see your best self. And so that has been fun for me over the last couple of years since retirement. And so I'm here and I'm excited to have this kind of discussion with you today, Mary.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Mm-hmm. So I think it's interesting because, you have, your business is called Core Leadership. And today's topic, what we're going to talk about is imposter syndrome, which sometimes when we think about the fundamentals of leadership, that might not come into play when we're talking about it, but it definitely comes into play as well as with our own well-being and our understanding of self. So talk to us a bit about what we're talking about with regard to imposter syndrome. What is that? What do we mean there?
Well, again, I'm really glad to talk about this subject because it has some ties to your message on wellness and mine that is strictly in this leadership lane. But what's interesting is because, there's a ton of fireworks that comes along with leadership, and not a lot of discussion on maybe the pitfalls or the inner struggles that maybe come along with, just being a leader. I mean, let's be honest, most of us have all been pulled, in this random fashion, rather it being deliberate, including even, in our institution that we belong to, where it was pretty rigid path to leadership, but we were all kind of pulled from a pool of heavy producers. And so the idea of imposter syndrome, like you said, it's fairly widespread, but and we talk about it randomly when it comes up, but it's not one of those developmental topics that it's been coined since 1978. And so this is a topic that I think that we need to bubble up to the top, and so that we can all talk about this in the open, and maybe just take a look at us and say, who am I? And to my core, who am I? And then I hope that maybe in this discussion with you, Mary, that it causes people to do maybe a self-examination and look at their own self-awareness, because truly that's where the tie is where is your own self-awareness.
Yeah, I didn't really understand, like the first time I heard the phrase imposter syndrome, I think it was I had been in the service for probably 18 years at that point. And so it was new to me. But when I heard the phrase, I was like, oh, I relate to that. That is so relatable, because there's been many times where either I got promoted or I was put in a new position where I felt like I don't know what I'm doing in this position. Am I supposed to be here? Right. And then there was a whole bunch of self-doubt that came tumbling down on me of like, why someone made some mistakes in this process. Right. And so have you ever experienced, like, you can think of a certain time where maybe it wasn't, as we kind of dive into imposter syndrome, maybe it wasn't really what it was, but at the time it was relatable for you?
Yeah. So, and if you know my story, then you'll know. And I was a perpetrator of imposter syndrome. And so you push a pin in that word that I just used. But yeah, I found myself as a chief master sergeant. So 20 some odd years in the Air Force, and I started to, replicate the persona, the swag, of other chiefs, because I just didn't feel like confident enough in my own abilities, and that I wanted the reception that these other big name chiefs that were around me, I wanted to know that I was received like that. Yeah. And so I started to take on some of their swag. And one day I had a presentation with a large gathering, and when I was done, I was floating around with my wife, and she looked at me and she says, "What are you doing?" And I knew what she meant. I literally knew exactly at that point when she asked me, "What are you doing?" And I answered, "I don't know." Because I didn't know any other way to explain it. But I call her my 4'9" giant, the person that will call me on my crap, right? Or just, will be honest with me. And she was honest enough to expose my own imposter syndrome and behavior. And so that was my own experience. And it really has this tie to core, right? And understanding who you are. So yeah, that's my own personal experience, and which leads me to understand it more and to be able to communicate about it more openly.
Yeah, I've heard that story before, and I really am so taken aback by it, because the amount of awareness that it took for you to even stop when she said that and to know immediately what she meant. Like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I don't know what I'm doing, I feel like it was such a quick ego check for you to be like, yeah, I think, and also it was a gift that she gave you.
Absolutely.
In that moment. Absolutely. What was it about you that, you for a moment, you maybe got off the pathway of being your authentic self, and you kind of stepped into this is what I think I'm supposed to do. What was it that in you, maybe it's a personality trait or something about yourself, that was able for you to come back so quickly as soon as she said that? And I asked this question because I don't know that that's very common. I think when people are called on their stuff, they get defensive a lot of times. And I think that's a natural response is, I'm uncomfortable and you're calling me on it. And then, so what was it that made you sort of hear her so quickly, I guess?
So I think, obviously I knew that I was, right? I did. And so that kind of, if I take you back to the word perpetrator, I knew that I was, right? And again, I was doing it with good intent. not so that I could get more likes or more, more people to tell me that they loved me, but so that, that the message that I wanted to share with people would be received well. And so yeah. And then I don't know, I guess when, when someone shines a light on, on your flaws, you either come out and fight, or you just say, yeah, right. And I think that's where I was like, yep, that's it. And so then I was like, okay, let's just do something about this. And so I was willing to. And so that's, I'm glad for her. I mean, and she calls me on a lot of other things, by the way, but but this one in particular was real important to my own leadership.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to label it, and I think that it's a great sense of humility. I think no one is immune to making mistakes. No one's immune to kind of getting off the beaten path or off the pathway of maybe who they're supposed to be for a moment. But it's attributed, in my opinion, to the humility that we have of being corrected. Like, yeah, it got me. Totally got me on that one, so no, I really appreciate that. I think that's an important lesson. And then the second piece to that is your vulnerability and your openness in sharing that story, because I know, whether or not people admit it, I know a large majority of us can relate to that. Like, I'm well aware, like for myself, I had been in the service, on an active duty base for 17 years. And then I got pulled out to go do a fellowship on Capitol Hill in civilian clothes with civilians, like, totally different, pulled away from what I've known for my whole adult life. And I seriously, my first week there was like, I think I need to tell somebody that they made a huge mistake. Yeah. I really think that that's the right thing to do, It just, what am I doing here? I had to do a crash course on YouTube on what is Congress,
Right.
And I just didn't know. And so I felt very much like, not that I was in a different way than your story. Not that I was not intentionally, but not that I felt like I had to fit in, which we'll talk about, but more so that somebody chose me and saw something that isn't there. That doesn't exist. I don't know why I'm here, which in the sense of what I see in reflection now, that wasn't reality. I was there because I was supposed to be there, and of all the details surrounding how that position gets filled or whatever. But it was very alarming to me and my system, Yeah. And the fitting in part, I think I really like to hear your thoughts on. There's a sense of, I know when and it's not just us, it's not military service, it's everybody, but when you are new to a job or when you go to a new school and you walk into a new room full of people you don't know, that sense of, how do I fit into this? Yeah. Talk to me about like some of your thoughts on those hesitations.
Well, that's really interesting, and the way that you put it, but I think it's important to kind of define it so then we could talk about fitting in. And that, imposter syndrome is this fraudulence. And I apologize for using, such triggered words. I've used perpetrator and now fraudulence. But, the funny thing about this phenomenon that it escapes no people, no demographic of people, right? Not the highly educated. I mean, here you are in Congress, and not the most successful, not the most accomplished, and not even personality types. And this pressure to achieve, it stings all classes of people. And so you talked about you being in this real important role, but just think about, artists like Milli Vanilli, or maybe a TV personality like the Kardashians. There's been people like Robin Thicke. They all have been exposed for copying other people, right? I mean, there's athletes like Kobe Bryant, who has been remarked and known to take on the persona of Michael Jordan. And if you wanted to even bring this closer to who you and I are, there is a person, his name was Chief Jose Barraza, who was exposed as a imposter. And so I'll just say this. And I said it already, and it's kind of like a hot take, but you're not a victim of imposter syndrome. You're a perpetrator. And although that you could be a victim of fitting in, but those are not the same. And that might sting a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
So, but fitting in is the vehicle to your imposter syndrome. I mean, you say, I'm compelled to fit in, therefore I take on a persona, right? And that's where I see where this all goes wrong, right? It is, and those two kind of work hand in hand. And it's unfortunate reality that, you know, you will perpetrate a different human being because of a need, but it's all for the purpose of fitting into a group. And so we can go further from there.
Yeah, no, I think what I want to do is I want to clarify something, because I hear you and what you're saying on imposter syndrome, and you said you're not a victim of imposter syndrome, because what I think is a lot of the population is defining imposter syndrome, because I just shared my particular story. I wasn't changing who I was or trying to fit in, or no. I just felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't deserve it. Yeah. But that's what you're saying. What I hear you saying is that's not really what imposter syndrome is. That's just maybe our insecurities kicking in overdrive. When in the reality, if we step back and we look at, why am I there in that position? Why have I been selected? Yeah, I'm fully qualified, right? So not the same thing. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Totally. You're totally right. But it's the behavior after you have this reality check. You say, this is my current reality. I don't know that I belong here. And then you begin to behave in such a manner that is not Mary, right? And then that's when the imposter syndrome kicks in, right? So meaning I don't fit in. I don't feel like I fit in. And therefore now I take on a different personality, right?
Yes.
So let's look at this even a little further, Mary. And that is that, and sorry for that, but you know, syndrome, I mean, if you look at syndrome is this group of symptoms, right, that all occur at the same time, right? So now if you want to get to the root of this imposter syndrome and fitting in, it's like, what could those symptoms be? And, you know, and as I've been looking at this in my new leadership role as a coach, I go, well, it's this unnecessary self-consciousness. And there's this shame, or there's fear, and all of those are working together, right? And so you go, why does one feel so compelled to fit in? And when you look at syndrome as it's defined, well, okay, what could be those symptoms? And when I look at it, I think these three symptoms are circling a human being and telling them, you know, that they don't belong there and they need to take on a different persona. And that's because they have this funny thing, unnecessary self-consciousness. That's not a diagnosis, but it's David Satch saying, man, there's this, why am I looking at myself so hard? Why can't I just be okay with me?
Yes. Well, see, now you're talking my language. It's funny because it's almost like the 6 degrees of separation. No matter what topic we're on, it's always going to bring me back to knowing yourself.
Right.
Like, that is the foundation for all of it, because
absolutely.
Yeah, you can walk in a room and you can say, hey, I don't feel like I should be here. I don't feel like I fit in, or I'm nervous, I'm anxious, I'm insecure. And then we have two choices. We can either alter who we are at the core in order to feel comfortable. I don't even know if that's going to be the ultimate end state, but to feel like we fit in, or we take the road less traveled in our mind. And that is, you know what, let me stop and think about what I actually do bring to this team.
Sure, absolutely.
To belong on the team.
Bingo.
Yeah. And that's way easier for me to spout that off than to do it. Right? Like,
no doubt about it. You know, sometimes we look in the mirror, right? And you walk across a mirror and you'll see yourself and you go, oh, right? But then we start to walk closer to it. And matter of fact, we get so close to it that our nose almost touches it. And we start looking at things, right? Just does no benefit to looking at these, you know, these flaws or whatever, right? And that's when I say unnecessary self-consciousness, right? To the point that we'll buy a strange little mirror that's sitting on the counter. We have one in our bathroom, and that makes us look, you know, reflects even more. And we go, why are we looking at ourselves like that? And it makes us feel more doubt and, you know, and less at ease and more anxiety. And that is the part that I think is one of the symptoms to imposter syndrome.
Yeah, that's such a good point. How, because I've done that before, guilty. I've gotten a little too close to the mirror and I'm like, oh, Mary.
Right.
And then I say to myself, but are people really going to be that close to me? Right. Okay, off topic, but no. So when I think about that too, I think, okay, so part of it is we are really, like you had said, we get real close and we get real like worst critic type stuff. Like we pick apart and things like that. But how have you found, what have you done to kind of take a step back and say, hey, you know, I'm not going to go that road. Maybe I'll go deep, but I'll go deep in a gracious way instead of a harsh way. Like how have you done that if you have?
Well, I can't say that I'm amazingly successful at this though, but you know, when I started to look at myself after the 4'9" giant exposed me, I had to go back and just look at my own qualities. What do I have to give, right? And then have this self-talk where it's, you know, this particular quality I have, it is caused this level of outcome or this level of success. And why can't I just lean on that as the thing that drives me forward and belong in that particular manner? And so you kind of gotta talk to yourself and look at you. And so, you know, you talked about self-awareness, and this is super important, right? To know what these qualities are so that you can be more forward with those, because then your confidence level then would rise. That's at least what I think that's worked for me.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that 100%. So I also think the comparison game
oh my goodness,
really takes up a lot of energy,
yeah.
You know, and I can speak from, you know, I had to stop myself. It's a big transition to leave a career after 23 years, whether it's a military or any career. You leave after being 23 years with an organization, and then you're starting something new. And it's really hard not to compare. One of the things I really kind of spun out in the last, you know, few months after was, well, am I doing enough? What's a colleague in the same space doing as me? Like, am I pushing myself hard enough and whatnot? And one of the things that kind of helped me with that, to recenter, like you had mentioned, what do I bring, is I noticed that some people would ask me questions about something that I'm doing, right? Like, hey, you're really, you know, I noticed you're really good at, you know, working on your branding and this and that. Like, can you talk to me about that? And it's coming from the same person that I'm looking at saying, man, he's killing it in such and such part, right? And so it really centered me to say, we all have something to bring.
That's right.
You know, the comparison is just the thief of joy. You know, have you experienced any of that? And like, do you use the same technique to kind of like?
Yeah. So it's all a big ruse, comparison, right? I mean, it's just completely self-defeating, because there's always going to be this image of what you think is success or what's good and what you aspire to be, and then you want to be more like it, and then you start to alter behavior, right? And but my experience says that there's these three themes that we typically put ourselves in, and hopefully this connects with what you're saying here. And that is, you know, the trap of I must be everything, and the trap that I must know everything, and the trap that says I must win at everything. And when you get caught into these traps, they expose these symptoms, right? They expose your fears, your shame, and your unnecessary self-consciousness to the point where, you know, you don't know what to do except alter your behavior, right? And so, yeah, so I think that, you know, once you say that I have to escape these particular traps, then you have to do the things like take notice of someone telling you, it's like, Mary, you are awesome at this. And then you allow that to drive you and keep moving you in that particular direction where you find success within your own skin and not with being someone else.
I think I really want to hit that point of define success.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one thing that if I could say devote time and energy to is defining what success looks like to you, because it is impossible that we all define it the same.
Yeah.
And when we get wrapped up in that being everything, knowing everything, winning at everything, it's quite honestly too much.
It is.
It's too tall an order to take on, you know. So narrowing that down, and that's part of creating your own vision for your life and designing your life and what that looks like, and then also defining what your success end state might look like. A huge benefit, right, to your own well-being in the process.
Yeah. And being realistic though about your abilities. I mean, I started out talking about me looking to the left and right of me. To the left and right of me was, Khalith Wright and, Manny Paneros and all these others, in the lane that I was serving in. And I'm going, why do I need to be like that? And is it realistic for me to win like that, or to know like that, or to be like that? And so those were, terrific, understandings of putting me back into where I really needed to be and thinking soundly. So that helped me tremendously.
I think that's such a pivotal moment that you described, just like it's sort of one of those memory burns that is, a juncture in your life when you can clearly see the fork in the road, where you stop and I think I know we all have those, of which direction we're going to go based on what moment we're in. And I think that was pivotal for you. Wasn't that the moment when you really started to think, because your book is called Extracting the Leader from Within. Is that my title, right? Extracting the Leader from Within. So was that a pivotal moment for you to really go down that pathway to writing?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it inspired it all, right? And so the subtitle of the book is called An Experiential Leadership Model of Influencing Optimal Performance. And so the book is about my experience that drove me to then say, I need to take from the qualities within me to find my best self. On the cover of the book is a pawn with a crown representative of any human, any person, or me just showing up, but learning that, drawing from these particular qualities, I can have king and queen like power. And so that's what kind of inspired it. And that experience certainly is what brought that, shined a light on it. And so it was easy to talk about because my experience told me everything that I could learn.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing that I've realized. And I don't know, I'm going to try to talk through this because it seems so much clearer in my head. But when you stop beating yourself up so hard from within and you take a step back and you look at your life more objectively and you say, okay, I'm in this moment. What can I do with this moment? What can I learn from it? And how could I move forward with it? I think it's that is so much more, I know this probably sounds obvious, but it's so much more productive in our journey than sitting there and just continuously beating ourselves up over the mistake that we made, And so one of my questions for you is kind of like it, because that's obviously harmful to us, but how can the need to fit in with others, that need to be a certain person, how can that be harmful to our well-being? What's the consequence of that?
Well, when you're constantly fed the message that you must look like this, or you must you must lead like this in my space, or, you know, something that's more pervasive, which be, you know, you need to work into the wee hours of the night. Those are messages that you hear, which really connect with, you know, your discussion and your message about wellness. Mm-hmm. When those are destructive because they create anxiety, they create also potentially even depression and relationship problems as well, because now you feel like you don't meet a standard, right? And that you're not enough. And so now when because of that, you become this imposter, because you always feel like you're never enough. And that's so damaging to you as a person. And so when it's tied to wellness, somehow you got to break that chain so that you can feel better about yourself. And so there's a lot of self-talk that has to be, you know, shared in that mirror when you look at yourself and tell you are enough, and here's my qualities that I bring to the table. And that's got to be the loudest voice in the room. And otherwise it's really going to hurt you big time. So I would say this also to you, Mary, is that the people that are imposters, and in the word itself, they're showing up with a mask, but the mask is not only their behavior, it's also them hiding this shame and fear and this anxiety and depression. And so that's where it's dangerous. And that's where, you know, where it really connects with wellness.
Yeah. And this speaks so much to me, because I don't even know, like, I can't imagine that, let's using your scenario and your story, I can't imagine that you were like, hey, saying this to yourself, I'm going to show up and I'm going to be amongst these other chiefs, and I'm going to adopt their behaviors, and I'm going to act like them, and I'm going to be them. And I can't imagine that's how your process went. Right. It was more just sort of this innate, I don't know, you just kind of felt it, and maybe that's what I'm supposed to do, and a confusion. And I say that because you're right. Like, this need to overachieve for me, the need to always be chasing something, to always be filling every minute of my day with something, or else I wasn't worth it. That need, years compounded, you know, a decade of doing that, caught up to me. And it really just totally, I hit, you know, past burnout. It was like full on burnout. And I shared, this is actually really new and really fresh, but it was such a whoa moment today. Yeah. So I'll share it here. But I had friends over for Thanksgiving, and they spent the night, we're having breakfast. And we are talking just about wellness and, you know, kind of my journey. And while we're talking, my husband was packaging up an Amazon box he had to send back or something. So he's over to the side, and he's using, you know, those really loud, like packaging tape things. I know you know what I'm talking about. Really obnoxious, but he's back there and he's doing it. And I'm really not even paying him any mind. I'm just like continuing my conversation. It was no big deal. So we're talking about that topic, and my husband jumped in, and he was like, he goes, yeah, he said, I really need to draw attention to something. He said, you know, 1.5 years ago, when Mary was really at going through a difficult time, and really kind of at my worst of it, he said, we actually had to coordinate times when I would be doing the packaging on the boxes, because he would be selling stuff a lot, right? And he's like, I would let her know, hey, I'm going to be packaging, I'll be in the basement, and then I would retreat all the way up to my office. And it was because I was in such a bad state with anxiety and depression, and everything triggered me. And so, like, the noise of that would send me just not like in an anger spiral, but just in, like, I wanted to crawl into a hole and my skin was crawling off me. Like, it was so bad. And he said, so the fact that we're in the kitchen right now having this conversation, and the whole time she kept talking and didn't even acknowledge this, it just drew so much awareness to me. Like, like, holy, let me stop. I'm going to, that's a win.
Yeah, no doubt.
That's a huge win. And so the what I'm trying to say with that is that the consequences of all of these seemingly little things that we neglect for ourselves have big impact, just as the seemingly small things we do for our wellness have a large impact.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know?
There's not a better example than that, and showing how it wins, and recognizing the win as well. You know, Maslow talks about this. I mean, that goes way back, right? And that the need to belong is essential to your self, actualization, right? Brene Brown keeps talking more about it, but this is really sitting on Maslow, saying this is absolutely necessary to find your best self, which is to find a place where you feel like you belong, is the only way that you can achieve your best self. And so, so it's not surprising when when you don't feel like you belong, then you find yourself in this state where you're just having an inner struggle. And then there's, like, you use the word shame, or you didn't use that, you used anxiety, right? There is this feeling like I don't belong in this place. Yeah. And so that's really, really interesting, and it's all tied together, and we've seen this before, we just haven't made the connection.
Totally. Yeah. And I feel like, for me, I feel like a great sense of that anxiety issues that I was dealing with, I didn't even feel like I belonged to myself. And wow. And that's where the inner work had to start. Like, whoa, wait a second, I've totally lost her for a minute,
So what did you do to actually recognize that for yourself?
I think I had pivotal moments, just like you had shared. One of my pivotal moments was when I became completely numb to everything. And so, and with my training and understanding of what that meant and how really scary that point was, because prior to that, I could cry, I could, show emotion, I could feel something. And then I thought my pivotal moment was, wait a second, I don't feel anything right now. What does that mean? And so it was a conscious effort and a commitment that I made to myself that I was going to this is going to sound weird, Satch, but I'm just going to share it. Yeah. Like that I was sort of going to separate myself from myself and then treat me like my best friend. And I was just going to say, hey, you know what, Mary, let's just give grace. Like, let's just take a deep breath. Let's just give grace. Let's stop trying to please everybody. Let's just start at the bare minimum and just say a nice thing to yourself. And so it was such a small step that I took. I cannot express that enough. It was not, I didn't the next day read a self-help book. It wasn't about that. It was just, hey, today we're going to take a deep breath and we're going to just give ourselves grace. Because there really was no place else for me in that moment but up. And I had to figure out which was it going to be, a rope? Was it going to be a ladder? What was it going to be?
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, that's what it was. But it started, to answer your question more specifically, it started with me making the conscious choice. It was a choice. And it was a choice to just do one thing. But yeah, that's how I was able to kind of find my way back from it. And in that process, I was able to start paying attention, I say this because I was so disengaged from my own life. Like I was on autopilot. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Click with Adam Sandler. Yeah. Like how he clicked and then it's all moving around him. And that's how my life felt for like the last 7 years. Just, it was all happening and I was just sort of a participant in it, but I wasn't really actively controlling anything. And so, yeah, that to me was like, I needed to kind of find myself back. So staying fully engaged in the process and just, I don't know, flipping the script on how I viewed myself, Yeah. So
that's really interesting because, the people that are, that perpetuate imposter syndrome, and while they're trying to find their way out, they're trying to escape it, they sometimes they will attribute their own success to being luck, right? And they won't ever give themselves credit for what they do, right? And so that prevents them from, from asking for a promotion or, or taking another step forward, is because they have really clouded themselves in this anxiety and depression that allows them to not see themselves for who they are. It's a trippy thing. And and for you to identify where you are, what your current reality is, was amazing, right? And not a lot of people, it takes a real life event for some people to find it. And good, you didn't have to break. I mean, you may have emotionally broke, but you didn't have to be broken completely to find it. So
yeah, I was honestly, there's different levels of like, well, why I share this message now is because I want people to be able to identify some of those things prior to getting as bad potentially as it was for me, or just acknowledging certain things that could help them along the way, but yeah, I think that was I'm so grateful that I didn't have a medical diagnosis that I wasn't able to work through on my own. Because I did, but it was, if I can do the work, if I can do the inner work, let's see how far I can get. So I was very grateful for that. And just staying present in the whole process. But something you had said, like, I really started to, I noticed as I was doing all of this reflection work that a lot of why I would not celebrate myself was the fear of others' perception of me. Oh, wow. And what they might think of me. Would I be conceited? Would I be cocky? And that's like my worst nightmare, is to be seen as something like that. But then I realized that putting the pressure on myself to control every person out there's thoughts is totally unrealistic.
Yeah, no doubt.
So if I know me and I know my intentions are truly meant from the heart and to be the best person to others that I can be, why would I add that layer of uncontrollable stress? And so I really started, and I realized that a lot of that comes from my childhood and the people pleasing and all that. But I realized that that's just too much to ask of myself. And so I was just going to be as happy for other people, as happy for myself as I am for everyone I love. If I claim that I love myself, then I'm just going to treat myself like I love myself. Why wouldn't I celebrate those things? And why wouldn't I appreciate, I'm 42 years old. I've had two wonderful, two great kids. Why wouldn't I appreciate that that's the body that carries me around through this world instead of picking it apart?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just it's a process for sure.
That unnecessary self-consciousness, it causes you to have this distorted perception of what, or misjudge the perceptions of others, right?
Yes.
And so you could tend to do things behave in ways that you never would, or how you wouldn't interact with others naturally. You're going to take on a whole different you. And man, this is such a crazy thing right here. And, you talk about self-consciousness and self-awareness, but they're all kind of tied together in this particular topic here. And if you get wrapped up into this thing, you could find yourself at a breaking point. And the beauty of it is that in your case that you did not.
Yeah. Yep. Oh, that's so true. Yeah. I feel I definitely found that what you just said, I have noticed that I am more gracious to others since being more gracious to myself. It has been the ultimate school of emotional intelligence. Like for me to really, if I practicing that on myself, and then automatically I look at other people's situation, I'm like, well, I don't know their story. Right. I don't know what they're going through. I don't know, even people getting angry on the road. And I'm just like, I sincerely hope they have a better day. So it's really given me an opportunity to, and that I did not expect. That was a nice consequence of this work, was just the amount of empathy and compassion I have for other people because I've shown it to myself.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Really, really awesome.
So this is, we both know, Satch and I both know we could sit on this Zoom and talk for the next 5 hours and just, just pull from one another.
We've done that before.
We've done it, but yeah. So I think this is just a crucial topic to discuss, particularly when we tie it into our own well-being, our understanding of ourself, our self-worth, our identity. What is what's one main takeaway, that you want folks to either think about, work on, or just walk away from this conversation and just really having drawn awareness to? What's your main takeaway for them?
Partly something that I did not say during this time, but I would say go on the exploration, the discovery of your authentic self, and go walk in it, right? And if there was 1, 2, or 3 steps, it would be, you know, identify your core strengths, and then what is it that you value, and walk in your values, right? And you can ever go wrong and your confidence level will be on high. But finding your authentic self would be crucial to escaping, this particular discussion that we've had of not being able to fit in, belonging, and perpetuating imposter syndrome.
I love that. Thank you so much for that. I think that's a definite takeaway, and just start doing the work, small as it might seem. Just start doing it. Yeah, no, that's great. So before we go, I definitely want to let everybody know everything about Satch is going to be below in the description box. So you're going to be able to find his website. I don't want to speak for you, but let me know, Satch, if I forget anything. But we have your website. We'll have your LinkedIn profile below. And if people want to get in touch with you, because you are taking clients, correct, for coaching. Mm-hmm. So if they want to get in touch with you, they can do that through your website, or is there a better way?
You can do it through a website. You can send me a message. I'm a terrible entrepreneur, Mary. I really am.
No, you're not.
And so if someone would want, I'm more connected to people, right? And my clients typically would like, Satch is my best cheerleader, but calls me on my crap, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's how I look at it. And that kind of relationship that can help you, kind of expose your journey and where you're trying to go and get to your goals. That's what I want to be able to do for people. And I'm excited to do that kind of thing. And so, I have very few clients because that's what I prefer. But if you're interested in that kind of coaching relationship that can help you, get to the place that you're trying to get to, just give me a holler.
I have to give Satch a big plug right now, because so we're friends. Mm-hmm. And I was telling another friend of mine how much I enjoy talking something through with Satch, mm-hmm. because you have just this automatic ability to make me see it through 5 different angles. And I'm like, I didn't think about that. Like, that's okay. So you're so good at what you do, and the world is blessed to have you as a coach out there helping people.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. That means the world to me, right? And if whatever I can give back to people, is what I think I was given to the world. And so that's what I want to do. I tried to do a job at Amazon, and I was like, this is not it. I'm out of here, right? And I'm in the place where I want to be, and I think that I'm most effective. So thank you for that, because that kind of gives me a sign that I'm doing the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for all you do. Also, everyone, pick up the book as well. That will be linked in the description box too. Such a great read. And obviously you can tell from our conversation, like just the way Satch shows up, authentic self, ready to talk about the discovery and how you move forward. So it's all in the book. It's great. So check it out.
Thank you.
But thanks so much for being with us, Satch. We appreciate you. Mary. And I'm sure we can pick a plethora of topics and have you back. So if you're up for it, we'll do it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much for stopping by. We appreciate you being here. We know that time is the most precious resource. So for you to spend it with us, it just means so much. Thanks to Satch for being our guest today. And don't forget, everything about him is below in the description box if you want to make contact with him or pick up his book, which I highly recommend. Thanks so much for being with us again. Remember to be well and live well.